we are going to embark on how to create a great monster. We are going to talk about the character development process and create our own maze. All this and more tonight on Haunt Culture. Good evening, ghouls and beasts, and welcome to another Haunt Culture. Today we're going to talk about how haunt monsters create their characters. Where are they from? How do they scare? Why are you playing a mad plague doctor that likes to take people's feet? We are going to discuss how it all comes together. Today I have a few spooktacular guests. We have Brittany Branham. Brittany has played a haunt monster for a few years. She recently has been a talent manager for a couple areas, meaning she's a supervisor that helps monsters develop their characters. On top of that, she is a remarkable theater teacher. We also have Casey Paulson. 2019 was Casey's first experience in a haunt. She was the bride in Gravewalkers. She also has a theater background. And then we have Shane Sullivan. Shane has played a couple iconic monsters, most notably characters such as Rufus and the Soul Catcher at Scarowinds. He has also trained hundreds of monsters for Scarowinds. All of these talented people have a lot of different experiences in developing characters. Thank you all for being here.
Thanks.
In your opinion, what are some important components that go into character development?
Personally, a lot of this comes from my theater background. You have to have an objective to be able to build any sort of character, what your character wants. If you don't know what your character wants, you can't really build a character off of that at all. And then obviously you have to take in your physical limitations, what you can do personally, vocally, physically, things like that. You can't build any sort of character if you don't know how your own body works. Take care of yourself, friends.
When I develop a character, a lot of it goes into research. I'm trying to think about what kind of character is this? Where are they from? What do they think? How do they think? I think about the theme of where I'm going into. A British accent doesn't work in the woods. You know, it's not the same thing. And continuity, really. Does this character add or take away from what I'm trying to build as a group?
The big one for me is whenever I'm developing a character is having a really detailed background. Having a backstory is really, really important, at least for me. And having it really detailed, even though those details might not get across to, of course, your audience, it's still really good to have them because it creates a more realistic character that you're going to do.
Would you say there's a difference to developing a character in a maze rather than a scare zone?
Absolutely. Obviously. In a maze, you have a lot less time to interact with a guest. So you have to build a quick, notable character that any guest walking through a room would be able to be like, ah, yes, that's a crazy butcher. Ah, yes, that is a crazy patient. Whereas in a zone, people tend to stand around a little bit more. So you have more time to be able to build more detailed characters. Not saying that maze characters aren't as detailed as zone characters, but zone characters do have a lot more time to develop those characters. So you have to think a little bit harder about those kind of characters, in my opinion.
To build on with what she just said, you don't want to create an avant-garde type character. Your backstory in a maze can't be so in-depth that they have to stand there for 5 minutes to figure out what the heck they're looking at. You want the scare to happen right there, not 10 minutes after they leave the maze. Be like, oh, that's what that was. Yeah, that'd be scary. It really has to work quickly. I think we used to say you have like 3 to 5 seconds with each guest in a maze. So it's got to be, scare and go. The biggest thing that I used to have issues with in maze was people not paying attention to direction. So like if you're in a maze, you know where they're coming from, you know where they're going. You don't think about the fact that, well, they might turn around and come back. In a zone, you really get to think about that and think, how is my character going to maneuver once they walk past me? Do I drop it and go back, or do I have to keep maneuvering? So you have to really think about where they're going to see you and how long you're going to be visible to them. In a maze, you get the little breaks, but on zones, I mean, you've got to be on.
I was in a zone for this past year, and like I said, having that background and having that character development, I had a groom, I had a partner. And so we'd have to bounce ideas off each other. We had a story, and there'd be people constantly watching, and we'd have to build off that story. But in a maze, I was put in a maze some nights, and it was very much so just more standstill scares and popping out. It's much less character, and it's much, not saying that you can't have a character, but it's much less that and definitely more like just go and do it.
So let's talk about the importance of coming up with multiple lines.
It's very important, obviously, to have multiple lines to a character. From a maze standpoint, you don't want to hear the same line repeated in all 18 of the rooms that you're walking through because it's going to get boring. In a zone, it becomes a little repetitive. I find myself sometimes thinking, 15 lines is going to be enough for the night for a zone. And then 20 minutes in, I'm like, okay, I've said all of these lines 8 times. I need something new. It keeps you fresh as a character. The more lines you have, the more creative you can be, and the more fun you can have. Because when you pull out a line that you don't say all the time, you're like, dang, that felt really good. Let's do that some more. And then guests come back all the time. We have a lot of reoccurring guests, and if they hear the same thing over and over again, they're going to get bored, and they're not going to want to come back. And we want those people to come back.
Keeping it interesting is a big part of it. I get bored if I have to say the same things over and over. The people around you, like you said, the recurring guests, they're going to get bored. And as much as it is you're trying to scare them, if they've come through your maze 8 times, they're going to know all your possible spots. They're going to know your basic lines. If you only have 3 lines to go through, they're going to start yelling them back at you. So it keeps them on their toes. Plus, you might get a different reaction from them. When you come up with a new line, they're like, oh, dang, I didn't hear that one yet. And, I think part of it too for me is that you can define lines. So you have a basic line and then you build it on the guest in the room at the time. So you talk about their shirt, their team, their shoe, whatever it is, you include it into that. It feels very real to them and they realize you're paying attention to them. And that for a lot of people is creepier because you're noticing stuff that they don't want you to notice.
Working in a zone, since I had a partner, my groom and I, we'd change up our stories some nights. We'd have people come back and they're like, that's not what it was last time I was here. Or it would be nice too if I was ever catching myself repeating the same lines. He would also catch me if I was saying the same lines and coming to me and being like, hey, switch it up. Hey, we need to do something new. We were like the couple of the park. That was just kind of like the bride and the groom. They're hand in hand and we'd have to build off each other.
Knowing and finding your scare skills. So some people, they already know when they come in what their scare skills tongue twister there. Some people coming in already know what their scare skill is, but someone new comes in, they auditioned as an evil clown and they got vampire, and they're like, what do I do?
So the big thing for me, especially as a talent manager, was telling my monsters to just try different things, try this tactic, try this type of scare, try these types of lines, and just letting them play around. I think it's very important for monsters, old and new, to try new things all the time. Again, you get bored doing the same thing over and over again, and you can't know your skill sets unless you try new things. I had a monster one time who did not know that they could bend over backwards at the waist and walk like a crazy person. Now, it's not advised that you do that all the time, but you have that in your back pocket if you need it on slow nights, So just trying new things, exploring yourself physically, and sometimes you're going to look like a fool. Ask your friend, hey, how does this look? Does this look scary? It's always fun to try to scare your friends too and learn what your skill sets are.
I think for me, scare skills come from what do I personally think is weird? What do I think is creepy? What makes me uncomfortable? How can I put that into something that's going to scare other people? Because we're monsters. If it scares a monster, you're like, all right, the norms out there, they're gonna really freak by this. The nail and screwdriver stuff, that to me, it takes time and effort. Like you said, try new things, try them safely, and hone it to where it's gonna work in the park. I think the biggest thing too is make it original to you. Develop a skill that you do that no one else does, and don't try to steal from other people and be like, oh well, I changed it 25%, it's now mine. No, it's still the same thing.
Yep.
But they can keep it safe also. Like you said, the slow knife with the back bend, as long as what you're doing can be done scary but safely, roll with it.
This is one thing, especially being a first-year monster, I struggled with. Finding my character, it took me probably 2.5, 3 weekends to really figure what my skill base was and what I was good at. For me personally, I learned that I can yell and I can scream without losing my voice, and I'm very, very loud. And so I took advantage of that. I was a very high energy, so I was constantly moving. I was skipping around, swinging my dress, or dancing, whatever I could do to really just keep my energy up. But I went through multiple stages of trying to figure stuff out, and it was frustrating. Being able to have the people around you kind of help you figure out ideas and then bouncing things off, just like they said, just really safely figuring things out. If you can scream, that's great, but if you're going to lose your voice or if you're going to permanently damage your voice, if you don't know how to scream properly, do not scream. It's a terrible idea. So it's really just safely figuring out what your body can physically do.
Yeah. Kind of bouncing off what Casey said, my first year, I was in the maze called Final Summons, and it was my first year. I didn't know exactly what to do, so I would like pop out and I would growl at people really loud. And then after that first weekend, voice dead. Like my mom bought me like some pineapple juice to kind of gargle to help my voice, but yeah, it works for some people, like Casey, but others, not so much. Most people, it does not.
Yeah.
Carry cough drops and drink lots of tea. I mean, just learn how to really scream properly, but those are so important.
Now, going back to mazes, the importance of utilizing your room.
So your room is the most important thing to you when you're in a maze. Obviously, that's where you're assigned, that's your home. If you don't know how your room works, you cannot create an effective scare. If you don't work well with the noises that are happening in your room, for example, a lot of rooms have like loud noises that happen. If you try to do your scare right in front of a loud noise that goes off, no one's going to pay any attention to you as a monster. You also have to take into account that part of the storyline. If your room is designed like a kitchen, you don't need to be a butcher in the middle of the woods. Going back along with the storyline and stuff Shane was talking about earlier, you have to fit into that atmosphere. You have to know every single little thing that's in that room and take that into account as you're building and creating those scares.
For me, I looked at rooms as a design standpoint, and I hate going to mazes anymore because I can walk in a room and I know, all right, I'm going to stand there, there, or there. And I look, I'm like, hey, there you are. Cool. Utilizing your space to the fullest. If you're in a drop box, okay, you're in a drop box. It is what it is. But if you have ultimate or different spots you can be in, use them up. I mean, transport. So once the group goes through, as they're going through, go to section B. The next group comes in, you scare them. As they're leaving, go to section C. That way you're never in the same spot. You get a chance to kind of move around and stretch a little bit. And it kind of takes away from the repeaters knowing that you're going to be in this spot when I come around the corner, and they come around and you're like, no one's there. And you get them from spot B and scares the hell out of them.
I personally have not been in a lot of mazes.
I mean, you worked in a scare zone. Were you assigned like a certain spot of that zone, or were you able to just walk?
Yeah, I worked on the boardwalk mostly. We were allowed to wander, but the boardwalk, I mean, using that area, I skipped and danced literally throughout the entire thing. I took my dress and I whip it, whatever I could do. I took up a lot of space, and creating that big presence, because I'm a very small person, was really helpful.
Did you have spaces on the boardwalk that you were able to kind of use for the hide and stay out of view while you were coming for your scare?
Absolutely. I couldn't hide as well, but it was easier for me to be a distraction. And then my groom could pop out from behind like the mausoleum or gravestones. And he had some really incredible scares, just using me, my large presence, as a distraction for them. And we pinball, it was a lot. I mean, we used a lot of our resources, and it was fun.
Nice.
You couldn't hide in a 17-layer dress?
I also had a giant veil on top of my head. I grew like 6 inches. I was not able to.
Kind of briefly already mentioned a little bit about this, but the importance of keeping your character connected to your maze or scare zone's story.
To keep it short and simple, you don't want to mess up the storyline of whatever attraction you're working in. There can't be clowns in the hospital. it doesn't make sense. It kind of takes the guests, if the guests are having a really great experience throughout a maze or a zone, and they get halfway through and there's something there that just doesn't fit, it ruins the experience for them. And being a haunt actor, it's all about the experience for the people. So you want to stay connected to that story, and it's going to help you build a better character anyway, because you have a story to build off of.
I think that a storyline in a maze. So if you start off with room number 1 and they start talking about, the guy that's going to be at the end, and then each room keeps building on this guy that's going to be at the end, that's really cool. But if there's no guy at the end and they're just building on something that doesn't exist, it makes no sense. And then it's a letdown at the end. You're like, wait, what the hell did I just hear about? Make sure that your stories are pertaining to what you're doing. Even if your characters are all there, if you don't, keep it inside the maze, it won't make sense. And then people get upset because there was no payoff. It's like a bad joke without a punchline,
Mm-hmm. Brittany, you've been a talent manager for a couple of years now. Would you mind kind of explaining what your responsibilities are exactly as a talent manager?
Absolutely, Leroy. I would love to. So, talent managers are assigned to different areas of the park to help assist monsters in building a character. Because new monsters and old monsters, everybody has their struggles building a character. As my job as a talent manager is to help you create the best character possible that fits within our little storyline. So personally, with my theater background, because I'm a theater teacher, that's what I do every day of my life. So this is a role that I'm always very excited about. You're working with monsters all the time. You're constantly helping them improve. You're critiquing them because you can't be a good monster unless you have a couple flub-ups. Everybody has them. We're here. Talent managers are there to support these monsters because being a character is a very intimidating job. It's very scary. Especially to the 16-year-old or to the first-year monsters who are coming in. They're very intimidated by this because there's 6'2" guys walking around on stilts, and there's people screaming at the top of their lungs, and people doing crazy things, and they're very overwhelmed. So not only are talent managers there to support you through your character development, they're there to support you through the process of becoming a monster, because it takes a toll. It really does, even to the veterans. So I like to call myself a mom. All of my monsters called me mom. All of my friends called me mom. That's just my kind of personality, and I take that into my talent managing. It's not just about building these characters and help supporting these monsters through this. It's about making sure they're taking care of themselves. They're hydrating, they're eating, they're taking the breaks that they need to take. So just overall, and then helping with the operational side, that comes with time. Just making sure everybody's safe, things like that. And most importantly, helping build those awesome characters that these monsters are going to fall in love with and love to play every single night.
Now, Shane, I remember when you would go around during an operating night and you would go to a maze or a scare zone and you would kind of just stay in one spot and watch the actors. What were you watching for, really, in those instances?
Ancient secret. No, realistically, my thing was safety. I tried to do my best as a scare school teacher to teach the monsters how to do effective scares, but safely. I would watch how they were utilizing their space, how they were interacting with the guests. If it worked, cool. No notes, you guys are good, roll on. If there was something that said, hey, hang back for a second. Let me give you some hints on this. And sometimes I just, depending on where I was at, I liked what they were doing, and I just wanted to watch it. There was a maze called Cornstalkers, and to this very day, I always think of this. There was one room specifically that they were not only utilizing the space well, but they were working together as a team so well that I sat there for like 3 or 4 groups just to watch what they would do. The one girl was sitting in a chair, and she was like the granny, and she would start a joke. She'd start the build-up, and people were like, okay, what's the punchline? And then her cohort was a scarecrow that was against the wall. He'd come out with the end of the joke, and not only would it be funny, but it would scare the hell out of people. I think my favorite one was, why doesn't Dracula like Taylor Swift? And they're like, I don't know why. And he jumps out, he's like, 'cause she has bad blood. And it just made me laugh. But again, I would sit in their rooms, watch what they were doing to say, you know what, you guys are awesome, great job. And then I would go to the next room and say, hey, how about this? You move over here and try to do this from here instead. But a lot of it was just minor adjustments so that they're effective but safe.
All right, and Casey,
being that this was your first season, how did you create your character?
I actually had my backstory given to me. I came in a little late in the season, so my groom kind of was like, hey, this is what I've come up with. And so with that background, we were able to build off of it and create a lot more. And it actually changed throughout the season. We started the first 2 weeks, started doing something, and it ended up taking just way too much energy. It was exhausting. It wasn't fun for me or for him. And it was just more restrained. And so as we changed the character and developed it over time, we were able to create a more stable baseline. So I went from like this crying bride begging to be helped and to just get out of this graveyard from her groom to be. It became to more so we were almost like the clowns of the graveyard. We were so in love and so intoxicated with each other. We were like psychotic, and we could never be separated, and we'd be like together forever, and we'd twitch and walk around, and we'd say it at the same time. It was just a lot of fun, and it really freaked people out, which was like the best part is so we weren't just, like the boring zombies. And we learned too is he was a very low energy monster. He could move around very slowly. Well, I was the exact opposite. I had to keep going. I was moving around. I'd jump, I'd dance, I'd laugh and scream. And we just kind of used the opposites that we had to help each other out. And that's why I'd be a better distraction while he'd be really good at those pop scares, because half the time people didn't even know he was a monster because he was so quiet and so slow and it was so dark out. It really worked.
Love that. That's fantastic.
I was in the graveyard, man.
It was fun. It was a lot of fun.
All right, well, now we're moving into creating characters.
It's alive!
So now, everything that you've heard us talk about, we are now going to give you a nice visual example of by creating our own maze. So I've created a maze prompt. I've assigned everybody here a character with a basic description, a prop, and their location in the maze. So they've had a chance to kind of create their characters based off that. It's very similar to kind of how you come in for your first day of training and they just give you that and you work with that. You kind of do your research and all that to create the character. So here we go. The maze is called Gravestone State Park. Once a family destination. However, something dark is at work here. The park rangers seem to have gone mad. A deadly, zombifying virus is spreading rapidly through the park. Will you survive the hike? We'll start with Shane.
Oh, Leroy, as always, this is entertaining. Undead Bigfoot.
It fit.
The long, mysterious creature of the park was the first victim to catch and spread the zombie virus. He now seems to be the one in charge of the park. I get to be a park ranger. That's cool. As a
Bigfoot park ranger.
Bigfoot. My prop is a hiking stick disguised as a boomstick, because who doesn't love a boomstick? And my room is at the end of the maze. I have a large bush and fake trees, a dismantled campsite and tent.
So my character is the undead bully. I was a playground bully. However, I don't know the rest of it because Leroy didn't send me the rest of the description of my character, because it stops at however you.
Oh, oops. Well, you know what? Sometimes you get handed those kind of characters and it's just
You
like,
do.
What? There's not more? Okay.
Yep. So with that being said, the backstory I kind of gave my character was that they are a undead bully, but however, they are sometimes they're still a child, so they're afraid of things. So the Bigfoot is very intimidating to this child, and they're easily spooked by loud noises and unfamiliar presences. So that will add some dynamic to my character. I have a prop that is a yo-yo with some blood on it, as any child would have.
So my character is trying to escape the park. I am a jogger victim, but I'm in the early stages of becoming a zombie, so I'm very, very fresh to it. And then I also have a metal water bottle, which is actually disguised noisemaker, so that's a lot of fun. But being a jogger and having a very small presence, I look very young, and I look very innocent. And so I feel like I could use that to play on the whole I'm just starting to become a zombie. So I'm like, hey, let's get out of here. Like, I'm trying to escape. But then I have that water bottle, which can create a really loud presence and like a really just shocking boom from my very quiet and very innocent looking character, physical. Yes.
And then my character, I am the last park ranger. He thinks he is the only person who hasn't gotten the virus. He's gone completely mad, and his prop is a chainsaw. And he is in the park ranger station room. There's flipped over desks, a couple park ranger corpses, a strobe light, and a taxidermy bear. And so, with that, he was always kind of the outcast ranger. So when this virus thing started happening, he just kind of closed. He's also a germaphobe, too. So he's just like, oh, forget this. And, you know, he killed some people and then just locked himself in the ranger station. But he's definitely deteriorating, going mad. So if you walk through his station, chances of you getting out aren't so good. You're trespassing. Okay, so let's move into the second part of this, which is your room assignments. Talking about how you would utilize your room, your prop, and what kind of scare tactics you would use.
So in my room, the campsite, I have a broken tent across from which is the campfire and some bushes that are very scattered. I'm always a fan of the zigzag. So when I'm running in a room, I'm going to start with position A, which I'm going to call behind the tent. And being Bigfoot, you know, you can hide behind a 4-foot tent and they walk in the room, then all of a sudden you stand up and you're this massive entity they weren't expecting to see. It wasn't like, you know, you come out of a closet door, they're like, oh, you're tall. You know, you come out of nowhere. The campfire is a great distraction for that position because they're going to walk in, they see that fire right off the bat. So, I mean, that tent's a great hidden spot. And then the two bushes on the one side would be great because you can rustle the bushes to create, you know, distraction and then come out again. Height is a great tool. If you can be big, be big. So.
And Casey, now to disclose, Casey and Brittany have both been placed in the same room. So that's
they get to share a room.
They do.
We get to share a room.
Got to assign a room. Shane, you know you got this. So I don't know did y'all kind of plan it together or no?
Not at all.
Oh, okay.
Which happens all the time. You don't meet your room partner until halfway through the night because somebody new shows up.
Yeah, it's raining out, so the zombie from Gravewalkers is coming into the maze.
Yes. So I kind of came up with my own perception. Casey, you can share your perspective. We can come up with an idea together here because that's how it happens a lot of the time in Haunt.
Yes.
So for me, I just hearing what Casey had to say about her description of her character, I immediately thought of her as the distraction, distracting people as they come into the room. Our room is set up. We are on the playground. Leroy should be showing a beautiful picture of our playground. Love his artistic ability.
Oh, God.
Good job, Leroy. So there's several places. There's a lot of trees. There's a wrecked car that has a horn that goes off sporadically throughout the night. Got a couple of fake trees and a playhouse with a dead body on it, obviously, because you can't have a playground without some dead bodies. So initially I thought, after hearing Casey's description of her character, she would immediately be the distraction because, one, she looks like a normal person. The virus hasn't taken over her body completely yet. So she would give off the safety aspect, the whole, we got to get out of here, let's go. And one of my hiding places she would lead the group directly to, whereas the bully would pop out with her yo-yo ready to strangle, ready to kill, enticing the guests to continue to move on throughout the maze.
Nice.
That was
Okay,
fun.
all right.
Casey, your
To
rebuttal?
build on top of this, lovely description. I love it. That's what I'm used to. I definitely can fit the whole guiding into like kind of your death. I don't seem like the threat. So then once Brittany does scare, there is that car horn, which is nice. And I also have my water bottle. So I can go from the sweet, innocent victim to starting to be like antsy. Like, I want to get out of here. I want to get out of here. We got to get out of here. I can start screaming because I have my voice. I have my water bottle. I can slam it on something because it's a loud sound. And once again, that safety network becomes more so Brittany gets her scare in, and then the whole like, oh, I thought she was the good guy turns into becoming like the villain or the monster and starts coming after them.
Nice. Good teamwork.
Thanks. Way to go, Casey. High five. Yeah.
So my character is in the ranger station, and it's destroyed. There are dead bodies, desks, broken desks. I would definitely use those desks to crouch behind, and I also kind of have a corner to work with. I got the giant taxidermy bear I could hide behind as well. I would definitely use too, like, my character's going mad, so he'll kind of seem reasonable when they're walking in, but I'll have that chainsaw kind of under the desk, so when they get close enough, I just come out, go kind of towards their feet, like, I need your flesh, it'll protect me. So that, and then the strobe light would kind of also help me hide, because they'd be kind of a little bit blinded by the strobe light as they're walking in. So that's what I would use.
Yeah, I like that.
Oh, I think we'd have a pretty cool maze here, y'all.
Leroy, that sounds like you normally. I don't understand. Where's the difference here?
What? What, that I always am hiding a chainsaw somewhere?
That is a Leroy
Yeah.
thing. You look like a lumberjack. I mean, you can't get more than that.
Well, that's me.
That was really cool. Let's move on to scare stories. All right, so this is the part of the this is the part of the show where everybody gets to share their best scare stories, whether it's one they were in or one they witnessed. And if y'all have a couple more than one, that's fine too. So we'll kick it off. Casey, tell us your best scare story.
Mine would have to be, all right, so to set you the scene, my area was very dark. It had a lot of black lights. And then it also had a lot of smoke machines and fog machines, which I took full advantage of. So, and I was in an area I would hide and kind of trigger this fog machine so no one could see where I was, or you could only see my silhouette. And I'd crack, like I'd sit perfectly still, and I cracked a really, really loud scream laugh. And there was this big group of girls right in front of me. One of them dropped, the rest of them bolted. Lo and behold, diagonally from me was my groom, and he let out a like, "Where are you going?" And I just scared the cat. And it just pinballed, and one of them came right back to me, and it was just, they really were trapped in between because they couldn't see where they were going because of the fog, and between him and I, and it was just pinballing back and forth, and we got a good like 5 scares out of it. And it was probably one of the best things I've ever seen. I've never looked someone look more trapped or terrified in such a large area. So I don't know, it was fun.
So mine's a little more gory than scary. One of my favorite characters I've ever played, her name was Pooh Girl. She didn't have a name. She was Pooh Girl. She was one of the more show experience oriented characters. And she was inviting people into her playhouse to mourn the death of her cat Kibbles, who fell into the garbage disposal. And Pooh Girl's favorite way to remember Kibbles was to eat out of his litter box, quite literally. And one night, there's several things that go into Pooh Girl's little ceremony for Kibbles. She would have them chant Kibbles' name. She had a bag of Kibbles' vomit that she would go around and kind of slap on people's faces and let them hold, make them squeeze it so they could feel how Kibbles really felt on the inside. But
It's fantastic.
sorry. The big ending show, the big ending scare, was she would ask everybody to partake in a after funeral snack and would take something from Kibble's litter box and eat it. Well, one day there was a lady. I pulled out the litter box and I sat it on the thing and I held up my snack for the evening and I ate it, and this woman throws her hand over her mouth and I can hear her physically vomiting into her hand. She looks around at all of the 6 macho men who are in this room with her. She quietly slurps it back up into her mouth and promptly runs out of my box and vomits all over the side of the scare zone over the fence. Meanwhile, I had only held it up and put it to my mouth, and this woman lost it. So I love the fact that I made someone eat their own vomit.
Brittany, you're terrible.
Wow.
Fantastic.
Scare
Favorite
goals.
scare.
Oh gosh, I have 2 actually. I'm going to share because
Do it.
many years of scaring, you come up with your favorites. The first one was Rufus always had a cockroach in his cheek. And I mean, carrying on full conversations, you never know what's there. It's a little rubber cockroach. And when you mix, the screwdriver up the nose, I had these people they were all around there watching this, and I've got the screwdriver in the nose, and I'm like, ugh, and I go to pull it out there, and I cough it up, and it's this little rubbery, wet, saliva-covered cockroach. And he's like, oh, no. I was fine with the screwdriver. I gave up when he's puking up water bugs. And she walks off like, right, that's a favorite. And there's a video of it, and I randomly will watch that when I need a slight pick-me-up. It was fine just puking up water bugs. And again, one of my last nights ever scaring, I was with a character, without naming names, that had some barbed wire. And another character that, again, without naming names, was a kind of an ovary type person. And this is on the gray area. We probably should have been doing what we were doing, but it was last night. You had fun. We were hiding. The ovary guy was at the far end of this exit ramp from a ride, and the barbed wire type person and myself were hiding in the bushes, waiting. So these 2 younger gentlemen, I'd say, we're going to say 13, we're walking down the ramp, and they're watching the over guy down at the end. And then the barbed wire person comes out with this obnoxious laugh, which is, if you've ever heard it, ingrained in your brain forever. And they jumped like, whoa! And then I came out of the bushes next to her with an imaginary chainsaw, and these kids go full Scooby-Doo, climbing over each other on the ground, trying to run. They get to the end, and the over guy starts laughing, and they're like almost crying. And we're all trying to compose ourselves. We're like, that just happened. We watched that? And you don't want anybody to get hurt, but when they get hurt, it's funny.
I do have one scare story to share. And this was back when I was in Playground. I was the band geek. They'd given me some tambourines. So I would go at people's feet with them. And I was part of a group scare. It was this group of preteens, kind of older. And we all come in at them. And this group spreads out. They fan out. Except this one girl, she runs up. There's this poor custodian that was there. She grabs onto the custodian's shoulder and just jumps up going, ah, ah, ah. And the custodian's like, what is happening? It was hilarious. Do y'all have any final tips you want to give about character development?
Don't be afraid to try new things. That's what I tell my monsters all the time. If it scares you, it's probably going to make a really great scare.
Mm-hmm.
Utilize everything you have. I didn't have a prop, but I had a 17-layer dress, and I would whip that thing. That was my prop. I came alive whenever I was in it. But also, if you feel uncomfortable being a monster, unfortunately, I was in a strapless corset dress. There is a lot of sometimes harassment. There can be people will grope you. This stuff happens. It's something you have to expect walking into it, but also if you feel uncomfortable, find a safe spot for you. Find a safe person. Your safety is top priority.
I think for me, the biggest thing is you are your own limitation. Well, within the realm of rules, you are your own limitation. You are only going to do as much as you want to put into it. If you want to be a great monster, put it all into it. Spend all of your free time. While you're driving to Carowinds, be thinking of new lines that you can write down, oh, that's a really good one. I like that. and just become your character. My wife used to say, during Scary Ones, she didn't know who the character was, me or Rufus. So live it, be it. It's you.
Thank y'all so much for doing this. This was awesome. I really enjoyed hearing all your answers and stories.
And so ends another Haunt Culture. I hope you enjoyed today's episode. If you are a haunt monster and you want to share your characters or experience, please do so in the comments. I'd love to hear from other monster performers from other haunts. Please subscribe and follow us at Leroy Pro Studios on Instagram, TikTok, and Facebook.
Keep it spooky.